for that important message. He has reminded us that we are not faced by a choice between health and jobs. It is well understood that overcoming the economic and social crisis depends on overcoming the pandemic. Our sister organization, the World Health Organization, has been the global leader of the response to the COVID-19 pandemic in its health dimension. And so we will now hear from Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, the Director General of the World Health Organization.
Director General Guy Ryder, Excellencies, colleagues, and friends. More than 136 million people are employed in the human health and social sector. All of them have the right to decent working conditions and protection of their health and safety. This is even more important in a public health crisis. Health systems, jobs, livelihoods, and the economy are intertwined. COVID-19 infections and deaths among healthcare workers continue to occur. I want to pay special tribute to the heroes who have lost their lives while doing their job of caring for patients. We call on countries to put in place decent occupational health programs and infection prevention and control in all health facilities, big and small, public and private, in cities and in villages. Together with the International Labour Organization, WHO has issued guidelines for protecting health workers' safety, as well as manuals for workplace improvement in health services and occupational safety and health in public health emergencies. WHO calls on governments, employers, and workers' organizations in the health sector to develop strong and sustainable national programs for occupational safety of health workers. More than 50 countries have already implemented such programs and demonstrated the benefits in public health emergencies. Together, we have a duty to protect those who protect us. I thank you, and I wish you a productive discussion.
I thank Dr. Tedros, Director General of the World Health Organization, for his intervention.
We are now pleased to hear Her Excellency Ms. Simonetta Sommaruga, the President of the Swiss Confederation and representative of the host country, and we would like to express our gratitude for their ceaseless support. Thank you.
Monsieur le Directeur Général,
Director General, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, there are those who have exhausted themselves at work and those who no longer have work. The pandemic has catastrophic effects, and it causes immense suffering and reveals in the true light of day the work of many workers and enterprises. Women are particularly affected, those who are overrepresented in the care sector and those who have less access to social protection and who have had to take on more family tasks because of the closure of schools and nurseries. Young people have difficulties finding and keeping work, and companies are facing major difficulties. Switzerland has not been spared, but we have followed two principles which have helped us a great deal in managing this crisis. The first is that it is essential to invest in a social protection network which leaves no one behind. Our unemployment insurance not only has the traditional unemployment, but also has temporary unemployment, which helps companies to ask for indemnities for their employees to keep their jobs and avoid companies going bankrupt. This partial unemployment has been extended to temporary workers, and we have also paid compensation for loss of income to independent self-employed, which is a novelty in Switzerland. We have looked at particularly affected sectors such as tourism and culture. The second principle is to invest in social dialogue. That is essential. The government of Switzerland is in permanent dialogue with social partners and has intensified its discussions during the coronavirus crisis in order to ensure that health and safety at work and health protection plans are implemented in various sectors of the economy. And now, how do we overcome this global crisis of the world of work? One of the answers is in the Centenary Declaration on the Future of Work, which was adopted last year at the 100th anniversary of the International Labour Organization. This declaration commits us to ensure that there is protection for all workers, that we promote sustainable economic growth, full employment and decent work for all, to allow each and everyone to benefit from the changes to the world of work. So Switzerland supports the creation of the new platform task, Thinking Ahead on Societal Change in Geneva, which is involving international organization, the private sector, civil society, science, and the future, so that we can anticipate the impact of the changes in society. Your Excellencies, only through international cooperation can we overcome the consequences of the pandemic, and respecting international law shows our solidarity towards one another. Together, we must do everything to ensure that this crisis comes out with a new society which is more just, fairer, and sustainable. The Agenda 2030 sustainable goals, development goals, must help guide us. The ILO, I would like to thank the ILO and its Director General for holding this global summit. Thank you.
Nous remercions Madame la
We'd like to thank the President for her participation.
To announce the intervention of His Excellency Mr. Moon Jae-in, the President of the Republic of Korea.
존경하는 가이드 사무총장님, 각국 정상과 노사 대표 여러분, 새롭고 더 나은 일자리를 만들기 위한 ILO 글로벌 회담에 함께하게 되어 매우 뜻깊습니다. 먼저 코로나로 희생된 지구촌의 형제들과 유가족, 병마와 사고 계신 분들, 일자리를 잃고 고통받는 분들께 위로의 마음을 전합니다. 아울러 인류의 건강을 지키기 위해 헌신하는 의료진과 방역요원들께 경의를 표하며 일자리를 지키기 위해 애쓰는 각국 노사정과 ILO 등 국제기구 관계자들께 감사드립니다. 코로나 지진이 전 세계를 강타했고 지진 후에 쓰나미처럼 일자리 충격도 벌써 우리 앞에 와 있습니다. 모든 나라들이 방역과 함께 일자리를 지키기 위해 애쓰고 있지만 코로나 상황이 여전히 좋지 않아 언제 어떻게 일자리가 안정될지 가늠하기가 어렵습니다. 한 나라의 경제가 유지된다고 해도 세계 경제 침체가 계속되고 국제무역이 활성화되지 않는다면 일자리 위기는 계속될 것입니다. 코로나가 가져온 경제 위기는 어느 한 경제 주체, 어느 한 나라의 힘만으로는 해결할 수 없습니다. ILO는 전 세계적으로 2,500만 명의 실업자 증가를 예상했고 취약계층이 겪는 고통은 더 가혹할 것이 분명합니다. 어느 때보다 사회적 대화와 국제공조가 절실하며 ILO 같은 국제기구의 역할이 중요합니다. ILO는 그동안 노동기본권과 양질의 일자리를 위해 큰 역할을 해주었습니다. 노동은 상품이 아니라고 한 1944년 필라델피아 선언에서부터 지난해 미래 일자리 보고서까지 항상 새로운 길을 개척해 왔습니다. 오늘 ILO 글로벌 회담도 매우 시의적절합니다. 글로벌 논의와 협력을 통해 일자리 위기의 해법을 함께 찾아내길 기대합니다. 사무총장님, 각국 정상과 노사 대표 여러분, 한국은 코로나 피해를 먼저 입은 나라 중 하나였고 일자리 충격도 일찍 시작되었지만 위기에 맞서 상생의 길을 선택했습니다. 한국의 노동자, 기업인, 정부는 코로나 극복을 위한 노사정 선언문에 합의했습니다. 인원 조정 대신 노동시간 단축과 휴직 등을 최대한 활용해 고용 유지에 함께 노력하기로 했습니다. 코로나 이전부터 한국은 지역 상생형 일자리 모델을 추진하고 있습니다. 지역 노사정이 상생 협력하여 질 좋은 일자리를 만드는 방식으로 전국 여러 도시에서 확산되고 있습니다. 한국의 전통적인 상호 구조의 정신을 노사 간에 서로 양보하고 고통을 분담하는 문화로 키워왔고 코로나 위기 극복의 힘이 되어주고 있습니다. 일자리뿐 아니라 노사관계에도 변화를 가져오고 있습니다. 한국은 또한 격차를 좁히는 위기 극복에 집중하고 있습니다. 경제 위기 때마다 불평등이 심화되었던 경험을 되풀이하지 않기 위해 한국은 고용 안전망을 더욱 튼튼히 구축하고자 합니다. 최근 고용보험 대상을 확대하고 한국형 실업부조를 도입하는 등 고용 안전망 확충에 첫 단추를 띄었습니다. 전 국민 고용 안전망 구축도 계획하고 있습니다. 격차를 좁히는 위기 극복은 우리 모두의 공통된 의지라고 믿습니다. 포스트 코로나 시대 디지털 경제가 가속화되면서 일자리에 큰 변화가 예상됩니다. 이에 대응하기 위해 한국은 고용 안전망을 바탕으로 한국판 뉴딜을 추진하고 있습니다. 디지털과 그린이라는 새로운 가치와 시대 변화에 맞춰 미래 일자리를 준비하고 만들어갈 것입니다. 한국은 오래전부터 노동이 사회의 근본이라는 인식을 가지고 노동이 존중받는 사회를 향해 꾸준히 전진해 왔습니다. 노동시간의 단축과 최저임금 인상을 위해 지속적으로 노력하고 있습니다. 한국은 상생의 길을 통해 일자리를 지키고 새롭게 만들어낼 것입니다. ILO 혁신협약 기준을 비롯해 노동자의 삶의 질을 높이기 위한 노력에 국제사회와 함께할 것입니다. 존경하는 사무총장님, 각국 정상과 노사 대표 여러분, 인도양 모리셔스에서는 도도새가 멸종하자 도도새의 먹이가 되어 씨앗을 발화시켰던 나무들이 자라지 못했습니다. 무엇보다 상생이 먼저입니다. 이웃이 살아야 나도 살 수 있습니다. 인류는 협력하도록 진화해왔고 분업을 통해 서로에게 필요한 것을 나누었습니다. 코로나로 인해 연대와 협력의 중요성을 더욱 절실하게 느낍니다. 국제사회가 각자 도생이 아닌 상생의 길로 가야 위기를 극복할 수 있습니다. 국제사회는 격차와 불평등을 좁히는 위기 극복을 위해 협력해야 합니다. 그 중심에 ILO가 있고 한국도 함께 협력하며 행동할 것입니다. 감사합니다.
I thank President Moon for his message and move on now to the next speaker, who will be His Excellency Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the President of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, who we will now listen to.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to share my thoughts at the ILO Global Summit on COVID-19 and the world of work, building a better future of work. I wish to appreciate the efforts that all countries have taken for smooth sailings of their world's tour of work at this sensitive period when we all are fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 posed us with perhaps the greatest human crisis in the modern period. As a result, the world of work is undergoing a massive reorganization in the post-COVID-19 period in developed as well as developing countries alike. Sri Lanka is a developing economy with a sensitive to external determinants. We paid particular attention to safeguard our workforce from the shock wave that was created by the impact that this pandemic had on the global economy. We have an active labor force of 8.6 million, out of which the private sector employs nearly 3.5 million. The social security measures that we introduced during the COVID outbreak covered all sectors of this workforce. The most notable one was the payment of a fixed monthly allowance of rupees 5,000 to the most affected self-employed categories in our workforce during April and May. These included all employees on a daily wage as well as many other vulnerable categories such as preschool teachers and self-employed persons. Sri Lanka has a considerable workforce that is employed outside the country. Even during the period where restrictions for air travel were imposed, we have repatriated nearly 15,000 Sri Lankans from destinations abroad so far. Although this made a considerable change to our overall employment profile, our aim was to secure the lives of our workforce. This fraction of the labor force will now have the choice to join the local labor force without returning to their original countries of employment. This in turn will shape the new normal of our world of work. Skills sector of Sri Lanka required a rethinking and re-engineering in order to accommodate the new normal of the post-COVID period. Reskilling and upskilling of employees will be addressed in our action plan to empower those who lost employment during this crisis. Sri Lanka has pledged to eliminate hazardous child labor by 2022. Abiding by this commitment, our Department of Labor continues to conduct investigations on complaints received regarding hazardous child labor even during the lockdown period of COVID-19 outbreak. Providing an umbrella cover to activities related to the labor force is the tripartite task force chaired by our Minister of Labor. This task force acts as a point of convergence where employment security, wage reconsideration, and all related issues are discussed between representatives of employers, employees, and the labor officials. Excellencies, I believe that the COVID-19 situation globally has not reached an equilibrium where countries can start having long-term plans. However, it has given ample opportunities for creating a new normal in the short term and considering it in the medium term. Sri Lanka views this as a stepping stone towards reshaping her world of work to suit the new normal in the post-COVID-19 period. I sincerely hope and wish that this opportunity will serve as a means for all countries to realign their worlds of work accordingly and emerge safer and stronger after this global calamity. Thank you.
I thank President Rajapaksa for his important message. And now we turn, because the ILO is a tripartite organization, to representatives of employers and of workers. And we will start with the employers by listening to the intervention of Ms. Sangeeta Reddy, President of the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry.
Warm greetings to all of you and namaste. It is my great pleasure to participate in the summit on COVID-19, the world of work, and building a better future of work. At the outset, let me congratulate ILO for organizing the global summit, and pleasure to be with you, and my sincere gratitude to IOE and ILO for providing me the opportunity to be amongst you on this day. The outbreak of COVID-19 has had an unprecedented crisis across the world, a health crisis and a subsequent economic crisis. India imposed one of the most stringent lockdowns, and this was a nationwide lockdown for almost 3 months. These containment measures have indeed helped us control the virus, but have adversely impacted economic activity, global trade, and the employment scenario all over the country. And currently now, factories are barely functioning at 50% capacity. I think it behooves us to first appreciate the fact that while all of us are in the same storm, we're not all in the same boat. The impact for those in the informal sector, the job loss, the fact that they have no safety margin or no safety net, these are things which have acutely come to our notice. And I think it's time for us to swing into action to support and ensure that there is no loss of life due to starvation. And I think the Indian government has done a tremendous job in terms of support, in terms of food. But I also believe it's time for us to analyze the structure of what we have and significantly look at what we can do about the challenge in job loss. 124 million jobs lost in India, of which most of them, 90% of them, are in the informal sector. About 27 million people in the age group of 20 to 30 lost jobs in April. This is not a statistics, it's not a number for us to look at, but really to analyze the impact on these individuals' families. How are they going to put the next meal on the table? What will the impact be for small children in the home? How do they manage the healthcare expenses of the elderly in the house? And considering this aspect, it's important for us to look at a certain number of pillars. The first pillar is really the best positive healthcare response that we can possibly give. After the healthcare response, I think it's crucial for us to look at the economic response. How do we bring back jobs? How do we reopen factories? How do we reduce the fear in people's mind and teach them to be safe and cautious? Wear a mask, sanitize your hands, maintain social distancing. So to be cautious, but yet not to be anxious to the point of completely staying away from work or staying away from their normal lives. Moving on to what I believe is the central topic or the theme is really the future of work. I first of all propose a human-centered future of work. In the Indian culture, there is a concept of a mandala, which is a period or a time cycle of 41 days. And they say that if you do anything for 41 days, it goes from beyond being a single action, but almost gets ingrained in your capability, or it becomes a habit. Many of us have been working from home for more than 41 days. So I think this is something which has now become very much a part of our capability, a part of our DNA. Organizations have adjusted, IT systems have stepped up, and people have learned how to manage in this environment to the point that WFH, working from home, is now, people are saying we don't work from home, it is LAW, which is living at work. COVID has really been an inflection point for the adoption of digital technology. I think one of the big things I'm looking at for my women colleagues is that it really frees up many job opportunities which they hitherto gave up because they needed to be in the home or supervise the home, or needed a certain degree of flexibility which a 9-to-5 job did not afford them. I think in the same breath, it's important for us to debate, to resolve, and to find solutions for how can we further formalize the informal work economy. What can we do towards a universal social protection coverage, because it is the lack of this coverage which has made so many people vulnerable during the pandemic. I would also like us to very quickly address the entire aspect of child labor, because during this pandemic, schools have been shut and therefore many children have been put to work. I hope that very quickly we are able to reopen our schools, not just because training is important and children need to evolve, but in India there's an additional factor that the schools are a significant source of nutrition for that child's life, because the midday meal scheme is a significant lifeline upholding the nutrition of children in our country. I also believe that we should look at multilateral cooperation for the revival of global economic trade. I would like to reiterate that the pace of business and economic recovery will be determined by how quickly we absorb the workforce which has been laid off during the pandemic crisis, and also create fresh job opportunities for people who will be joining in future. Business or economic revival will truly depend on demand stimulation, on international trade, on productivity, on exports, on ease of doing business, on alternatives to what we are exporting, on various aspects of competitiveness where the workforce are a very crucial part. And keeping all these aspects in mind, I think that we should look, for the sake of the world, for the sake of our future, for the sake of the environment, that we work together, we work collaboratively, we work in a humane manner, and we create a human-centric approach to recovery, to revival, to the workplace. All the very best to each one of you. Stay safe. I hope that very soon the world comes out of this, the throes of a pandemic. I hope that very soon we discover a vaccine, and that we can look forward to the normal returning as quickly as possible. With warmest greetings from India, with my very best wishes from FICCI, the organization which I represent, which has over 350,000 members as its representatives. I thank the ILO for organizing this conference virtually, so that there is no break in the tremendous momentum that you have created across the world in taking care of the labor force. Namaste and thank you.
Let me thank Ms. Reddy for her message on behalf of the employers of India, and turn now to the workers. And we will be hearing now from Mr. Rikio Kozu, who is president of the Japanese Trade Union Confederation, JTUC Rengo.
連合会長の構図です。日本
I am Rikio Kozu, President of the Japanese Trade Union Confederation. I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to deliver a message on behalf of the workers in Japan and the Asia-Pacific region. I would also like to express heartfelt respect to the Director General, Mr. Guy Ryder, and the ILO office for their tireless efforts and the information they disseminate. First of all, facing this unprecedented crisis, I would like to send heartfelt greetings to all of our worker colleagues, governments and employers around the world struggling every day. Let's get through this together. I would also like to call for renewed unity of governments, workers and employers all around the world. Now, in the face of the threat of COVID-19 and the harsh reality confronting us, I cannot but put forward an honest question. Had the world forgotten the lessons learned from the global financial crisis of a decade ago? We have come now to this day without having fulfilled commitments we had entered into to create a sustainable and inclusive economy and society. We must not repeat the same mistakes. This time, fundamental policy change and social structural reform are necessary. Rengo is strongly supporting initiatives to protect the lives, work and livelihoods of all workers and ordinary citizens. These goals can be achieved only when they are pursued through tripartite social dialogue, which has been established widely around the world by the ILO. Rengo has been operating a telephone counselling hotline throughout Japan. Through the heartbreaking voices we have heard, we have become painfully aware of how weak the current safety nets are and how seriously vulnerable people have been affected. Therefore, I feel strongly that the importance of the functioning of collective labour management relations is vital and can exist precisely because trade unions exist in workplaces. In this context, I must be concerned about a trend in some countries to undermine the fundamental rights of trade unions and workers. Human rights and trade union rights are universal rights that must be protected and respected in all countries. The world must be united in speaking out against any movement that violates these rights. Last year, on the occasion of the 30th anniversary of Rengo, we formulated a new vision, a secure society based on work, protect, connect, create. Our efforts to realize the society set out in the vision are precisely in line with the pursuit of the human-centered approach which the ILO advocates. The road to overcoming the crisis and creating a post-COVID-19 society will not be an easy one. We should stay hopeful while struggling with the harsh reality. I would like to emphasize that it is our resolve and our actions that can change our future to a brighter one. Rengo is committed to further strengthening the framework of social dialogue to address these various challenges, and we will continue to make the greatest possible efforts to realize an inclusive and human-centered sustainable society and a secure society based on work. Let's move forward together towards that goal.
I want to thank Kosu-san for his statement on behalf of the workers of Japan, and we will return now to statements from government leaders, listening next to His Excellency Mr. Josiah Voreke Bainimarama, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Fiji.
Bulavinaka from Fiji. After another worse than anticipated quarter for the world economy, COVID-19 is clearly the job killer of the century. If we stand any hope of stemming losses in employment at millions rather than billions, we must act fast to rally to the aid of those most vulnerable. The challenges faced by small island developing states like Fiji are all too often masked by the ILO's broad regional groupings, like Africa, the Americas, and the Asia Pacific. In fact, Fijians generally share more careers in common with those in the island economies of the Pacific Caribbean, and the Indian Ocean than with the larger Pacific Rim economies. Across each of these regions, SIDS are shouldering this pandemic's most severe economic fallout. It's no big wonder why citizens in SIDS economies rely a great deal on the health of travel-related industries. The scale of our labor markets means global shocks hold far more destructive impact, and we don't have the deep pockets of wealthier nations to bail out whole industries or pump stimulus levels of liquidity into our markets. Fiji is a COVID-contained country with no cases outside of our quarantine facilities in over 80 days. But even with our outbreak in Fiji ended and the global epicenter of the pandemic moving westward, the burden the Fijian people carry on their backs has not shifted an inch or lost a gram. The floors of many factories are still quiet. With borders shut around the world, Fijian tourism has come to a halt. Many jobs have still not returned. Some may never. In total, 115,000 Fijians, 1/3 of our workforce, have had their jobs lost or hours cut. I've met many of these employees. I've listened to the stories behind that staggering statistic. You can't suddenly work from home when you earn your paycheck as a scuba instructor, or in a garment factory dependent on regional supply chains, or as a handicraft maker who usually sells to tourists. And many young people never imagined starting their careers in the midst of a pandemic. Now many of their employable talents sit idle. These are the faces behind the dismal figures for employment, the high human costs of this pandemic, which mount by the day. In many ways, COVID-19 is deepening the very same inequalities exposed by climate change, a painful parallel that is accelerating catastrophe across SIDS economies. Neither climate change nor COVID-19 can be treated with over-the-counter cure-alls. Both require prescriptive solutions, including urgent actions to adapt societies along with larger, longer-term shifts in the world economy. When it comes to livelihoods, we must protect those facing the greatest risks and position our economies towards a new normal, a better normal for the world of work that is bluer, greener, more cooperative, and more resilient, both to climate change and to COVID-19. And as with our commitment to climate action, Fiji is committed to leading by doing. After decisively containing the virus, we launched a COVID-safe economic recovery, reopening much of our domestic economy. Our workplaces are operating in line with tailor-made COVID-safe operation plans, and we've launched a mobile application dubbed Care Fiji that speeds up contact tracing efforts, if ever necessary. We're opening blue lanes to allow private marine vessels to safely enter Fijian waters, a blue bubble to reopen travel with Australia and New Zealand, and Pacific pathways to reconnect with our smaller Pacific island neighbors. We are funding Fijians with valuable skill sets to switch from job-taking to job-making, providing concessional micro-enterprise loans to someone who, for example, formerly made their living in a hotel bakery to set up a pastry shop of their own. And government has created a new category of unemployment benefits to aid employees whose incomes have evaporated or hours have been slashed due to the pandemic. But Fiji and other small island economies can't weather this storm alone. When it comes to growing our economy, protecting livelihoods and reducing poverty, along with our urgent priorities of climate adaptation and oceans preservation, we've long struggled to reconcile our realities with the ILO's broadly focused frameworks. When it comes to COVID, SIDS need resources, not regulations better suited to larger labor markets. Let's find opportunity in this crisis by recognizing how the ILO can better support employers and employees who rely on the stalwarts of small island economies, like tourism, and target support accordingly. Let's get people back to work And let's also look out for the planet by using our COVID comeback to spur just transitions towards sustainable pathways to prosperity. And let's help employers and employees take these challenges on together. We haven't seen the end of the extraordinary sacrifices exacted to endure the crisis. Until these headwinds abate, governments, employers, and employees take sober stock of reality and put everyone's well-being at the heart of a compassionate response and, ultimately, an inclusive recovery. Thank you.
We are grateful for the statement of Prime Minister Baini Marama. And now we move on, and I have the pleasure of introducing the intervention of Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina, Prime Minister of the People's Republic of Bangladesh.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. His Excellency Mr. Guy Ryder, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and very good afternoon. I am happy to join this event on ILO's Global Leaders Day during the global COVID-19 pandemic that has affected our nations, especially our workers, the most. I will share our experiences and measures on how we are dealing with the crisis. Bangladesh deeply appreciates ILO's all endeavors. This global calamity has now threatened the very base of globalization and connectivity that all of us have carefully built over the years. This is no longer just a health problem but becomes a full-fledged global economic and social crisis. Like many other crises, the LDCs and developing countries are facing the main burden, although the crisis did not start with them. During this pandemic, our domestic and external supply chains were severely disrupted. We lost export orders of billions of dollars. Many of our industries were closed and millions of workers lost their jobs. Our small industries lost most of its resources and markets, and above all, our agriculture suffered huge loss due to supply chain disruption. On the back of it, we are hosting 1.1 million forcibly evicted Rohingyas from Myanmar. When the crisis of COVID-19 began to unfold, we immediately announced a $12.1 billion stimulus package for various sectors of our economy, as well as support to different segments of our society. This support package is equivalent to 3.7% of our GDP. To support our workers in export industries, we have given $1 billion for paying wages of the workers. My government hiked wages of the garments workers by almost 500%, and also workers of other sectors by, on an average, 360% since we assumed office in 2009. We provided cash and other incentives directly to more than 50 million people who lost their daily income during this pandemic. I must here mention the huge loss of jobs of our migrant workers and the resulting shortfall in remittance. It's a great concern for us as remittance is a key component to achieve the SDGs. Currently, repatriation of these jobless migrant workers has proved to be a huge challenge. The World Bank predicted that we will lose more than 20% of our earnings from remittance. Under these circumstances, we may remember the centenary declaration of ILO, where all of us recognize to transform our world through technological innovation, demographic shifts, climate change and globalization. The virus does not discriminate, but its adverse impacts severely discriminates against the vulnerable, especially the migrants and women workers. In this regard, my suggestions are: number 1, job of migrant workers at the overseas markets must be retained during this crisis. Number 2, in case of layoff, compensation and other dismissal benefits must be paid in full, along with ensuring their safety and health benefits. And number 3, after the pandemic, these workers would have to be recruited for reactivating the economy. In conclusion, I must say that a vigorous, well-coordinated, and worldwide response with the participation of all countries, international organizations, civil society organizations, and private sector is needed now. UN and international organizations will be at the center of all recovery measures to be supported by G7, G20, OECD, and international financial institutions. With everything happening all around us, the promises of decent jobs for all seems hard to realize individually. But I am convinced that together we can do it. I wish ILO all success for this event. Thank you very much.
We thank Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina for her intervention, and we will now hear from His Excellency Mr. Tuilaepa Lupe Selele Malielagawi, who is the Prime Minister of the Independent State of Samoa.
Mr. Chairman, Director General, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to address this ILO Virtual Global Summit on COVID-19 and the world of work on behalf of the government of Samoa and the constituents of the Samoa National Tripartite Forum. These are unprecedented times that we live in as we witness the global devastation caused by the coronavirus. It has claimed thousands of lives and impacted the livelihoods of people across the globe. The detrimental impact on the world economy is unprecedented and felt by all. Even though Samoa remains COVID-19 free, we continue to be vigilant and enforce protection measures to ensure that the virus does not reach us. Implementing these measures are not easy, but are important for the protection of our nation and its people. Given our limited resources and capabilities to respond to any community spread of the virus. As the world awaits a vaccine for COVID-19, over 100 million people are in a state of extreme poverty. 200 million have been left without work, and companies and industries worldwide that drove economic growth have been forced to shut down. Further worsening of the global economic outlook is expected. According to the International Monetary Fund, the projected contraction in 2020 will exceed 6%.
For Samoa alone, it is anticipated that the economy will see a negative growth rate of 3.3% in the current 2019-20 fiscal year. The focus of the Global Summit is therefore important, and these dedicated discussions will be key to our efforts as government and tripartite constituents, building back better in the post-pandemic recovery. Importantly, we must draw on the centenary for the future of work to inform our initiatives. Excellencies, while Samoa and most of the Pacific have been spared from the virus so far, we are already feeling the impacts on our small economies. The COVID-19 situation also came as Samoa was still responding and recovering from another health crisis, the 2019 measles epidemic that took 83 lives and affected over 5,000 people. The pandemic has exacerbated our unique and particular vulnerabilities as we also continue to face the threats of natural disasters as well. It not only validates our need for global sustainability, but it also highlights our interconnectedness, hence the need for global solidarity in order to respond effectively. The government of Samoa took early measures to ensure adequate support, in particular towards households and workers with family responsibilities to lessen the economic impact of the crisis. On 7th of April, government launched phase 1 of its stimulus package, totaling Samoan Tala 66.3 million, focusing on health, private sector, food security in the agriculture sectors, securing the purchasing power of our people, and a multi-sectoral response program. On 26th of May, the second phase was announced, totaling Samoan dollars 32 million, with more targeted support of social protection measures to the vulnerable groups. This included, for the first time ever, provision of unemployment subsidies for those who have lost jobs or have reduced hours because of the COVID-19. The projection for Samoa's economy in the new fiscal year show a negative growth of 2% due to the uncertain economic conditions in the global and regional markets. There is uncertainty also as to when our borders will fully reopen, as the adverse impacts on our tourism industry and trade are already felt. We are reliant on our sector-wide approach and finding innovative solutions to address the socio-economic impacts of COVID-19. As we start to repatriate most of our stranded citizens, we maintain caution and continue to rely on our neighbors and partners to support our ongoing efforts. Innovative responses to global challenges are now coming from emerging development partners and smaller players who have better managed the pandemic and who in turn may become strategic partners for other developing countries. In the spirit of global solidarity, the ILO could offer an opportunity for its member states to exchange experiences in preserving access to decent work during crisis. Excellencies, such strategic responses include the United Nations and our development partners, ensuring continued implementation of pipeline projects under grant assistance for the next 5 years, to secure employment opportunities for our youth, as well as to raise direct injections into the economy. In some cases, reprioritization is necessary to give priority to those who need the assistance the most. In this regard, my government supports the United Nations in the pursuit of a comprehensive social economic impact assessment and an effective response to bring countries back on track for the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. The ILO Pacific Office, through the National Coordinator, is currently supporting the Samoa National Tripartite Forum constituents to complete its rapid assessment survey on the impact of COVID-19 on employment and enterprises, the data that is most needed at this stage. The objective of this joint assessment and monitoring is to contribute to national level evidence-based COVID-19 recovery policies and programs prioritized by the tripartite to advocate for targeted stimulus packages, effective and equitable donor investment, addressing specific employers and workers' individual value propositions, and informing ILO's continuous and effective support to its tripartite partners in Samoa. Director General, we look forward to the ILO reviewing directives and occupational safety, health standards for the work environment in light of the lessons learned during the pandemic. Moving forward, the workplace requirements and the business model of public and private enterprises must consider profound changes to ensure people are not exposed to contamination on the way to work or at work due to inadequate environments. Employment, as we know it, may not be a solution for a sustainable future. Decent work will need to factor in such new requirements for the workplace and work-related rights and entitlements. We do need a strengthened social contract to commit to managing health-related risks during life cycles. The government of Samoa stands ready to participate in a constructive discussion as to what those changes should be to minimize the risk of pandemics and save lives. I wish to thank the Director General for inviting Samoa to become a member of the International Advisory Board of the Climate Action for Jobs initiative. We look forward to constructive partnership within this platform to achieve significant action on climate change. I thank you.
I want to thank the Prime Minister for his intervention. And now we will listen to the message of His Excellency General Prayut Chan-o-cha, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Thailand.
ท่านผู้อำนวยการใหญ่
Director General of the International Labour Organization, heads of ILO member states, employers' representatives, Thailand is very pleased to join you today in the Global Summit on COVID-19 in the world of work, building a better future of work. I'm pleased to be with you today via this video conference. I'd like to express my heartfelt thanks to the International Labour Organization for hosting this summit, which gives us an opportunity to address the impact on our economy and society, and particularly the impact on the world of work of COVID-19. As a consequence, the governments, employers, workers need to adapt the way we work in order to embrace all the changes and adopt a new lifestyle in what we will come to call the new normal. The Royal Thai government introduced immediate national response measures and put them to effective implementation without delay in order to sustain employment and mitigate the economic and social impacts to a minimum. Priority is given to employment promotion with decent income for all. New forms of work will not stop the Royal Thai government's efforts to protect workers. All workers in Thailand are protected according to the principles of decent work and equality, regardless of their nationality. These include expansion of labour protection and promotion of industrial relations systems for job retention, expansion of social protection coverage, employment promotion and skills development, both the upskilling and reskilling. And we're doing this in order to promote re-entry into the labour market after the COVID-19 pandemic. For Thai workers overseas, the government has insisted them by following up on their behalf to ensure their compensation entitlements and social protection benefits are met, as well as arranging safe patriation back home. As for migrant workers in Thailand, the government has employed leniency by relaxing legal measures on extending the validity of visas and work permits. This allows those with legal status to continue working in the country. Relevant information in various languages has been disseminated so that workers can have a better understanding on how to protect themselves from COVID-19. In this regard, insured migrant workers are receiving the same social security remedies as are Thai workers. Thailand is determined to restore its economy and society to the better after the COVID-19 pandemic. We want to do this along the lines of sufficiency economy philosophy that emphasizes the balance between economic, social and environmental development. This philosophy promotes people-centered development and enables sustainable development, which is to leave no one behind. This includes strengthening competency of people, of communities and enterprises in order to promote sustainable and socially responsible business through the promotion of employment and creation of decent work, together with effective social dialogue to create immunity for all sectors in dealing with the challenges and changes of the future world of work. Thailand stands ready to cooperate with the international community in both bilateral and multilateral partnerships in restoring and strengthening the world economy, as well as creating a better and more sustainable society. On this occasion, I'm pleased to invite the International Labour Organization and its member countries to observe the Centenary Declaration for the Future of Work, through adhering to the fundamental principle and rights at work and in strengthening a comprehensive and sustainable social protection system. We must help each other to overcome the crisis. Because today we must survive, tomorrow we must be stronger and move forward, and in moving forward we must make sure that no one is left behind. And we do this by aiming at creation of decent work for all. Thank you.
The Prime Minister for his statement. And the next message will be that of His Excellency Mr. K.P. Sharma Oli, Prime Minister of the Federal Republic of Nepal.
Mr. President, Excellencies, the heads of state and government, Director General of ILO, Mr. Guy Ryder, employers and workers representatives, ladies and gentlemen. Let me commend the Director General of ILO for taking this timely initiative. The world is now seized by an invisible enemy, the pandemic of COVID-19. Over 500,000 people have lost their lives. It is uncertain how it will unfold further. Invention of vaccine and making it judiciously accessible to all remains unclear. In such a situation, protecting the lives of people becomes extremely important. Loss of human life cannot be replenished. The pandemic has thrown millions of workers and enterprises vulnerable. Overall economy has suffered with global decline in investment, trade, and disruption in travel industry. As a consequence, people are losing jobs. Economists project a bleak scenario for global growth in 2020. When labor-intensive job market declines, millions will fall into poverty. The impact becomes unevenly high in the LDCs and low-income countries. Declining remittances and potential reduction in ODA and shrinking of other resources will further compound economic stagnation. Crisis of this proportion calls for robust global response with United Nations and its specialized agencies like ILO at the center. We should support and strengthen them to promote women-centered agenda to decent work is embraced by the ILO. Protection of the most vulnerable, including the migrant workers and those in informal sectors, and provision of adequate social security and health care is key to minimize the impact. However, it is unfortunate that migrant workers who have contributed to the building of destination countries are losing hopes and returning home in the midst of the pandemic without protection of their job and income. This situation, contrary to the ILO principles, could have been avoided and norms of WHO should have been observed in the process. In Nepal, within 108 days, in an average 3,000 people returned home every day from India, crossing our land border. About 500,000 migrant workers are expected to return from the Gulf region and other countries. It doesn't mean that we are not welcoming our nationals back home. But this scale of sudden return has posed tremendous pressure on our health system as the cases of infection shoot up rapidly. I held several telephone conversations with heads of state and government in labor destination countries seeking their cooperation for the protection and well-being of the Nepali workers. At home, we are protecting foreign nationals in our country during this pandemic. Humanity is tested in the time of crisis. Our conscience should guide us to uphold justice and fairness even in the time of extreme difficulty. International solidarity at this hour could prevent the job loss, return of migrant workers, and reversal in the progress of SDG and resulting rise of poverty. Poverty and sudden stress on local labor market endangers larger peace and stability worldwide. Excellencies, we in Nepal have invested resources within our capacity to fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. We have employed both preventive and mitigating measures that include testing, contact tracing, quarantine, isolation, and social distancing. We are close to meeting the target of testing 2% of our population. Temporary measures such as nationwide lockdown and restriction in movement help us to contain the virus to a large extent. Number of deaths so far remains minimal. Estimates are that nearly 63% of Nepali workforce will face some degree of impacts, which is more severe in urban areas and in service industries like hotel, restaurant, catering, and tourism sector. We have responded to the situation with some immediate and medium-term measures. For those in informal sector, we have provided food and wage for work as an immediate relief. For those in the formal sector, we have ensured payroll protection, rescheduling, and capitalization of loans and waivers on electricity, among others. We are trying to convert this challenge into opportunity with a special focus on building our health infrastructures. In the medium term, we have devised programs such as Prime Minister's Employment Program, Food for Work, subsidy to private sector for internship wages, skilling for redeployment, and reorienting of poverty alleviation funds for production and sustainable employment generation, restructuring of agriculture, and support to SMEs. Provincial and local governments are also implementing programs for promoting job opportunities in coordination and collaboration with the federal government. While we are committed to partnership and social dialogue in the process, we also look forward to greater solidarity to address the situation globally. I thank you.
We are very grateful to the Prime Minister for his contribution, and the next message will be that of His Excellency Imran Khan, the Prime Minister of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Mr. Guy Ryder, DG ILO, I want to thank you for holding this virtual ILO summit and at a very critical time for labor all over the world. The lockdown, because of the pandemic, has hit the labor community the most. And this is why this summit is extremely important, because the issue is ongoing. The virus, the pandemic is ongoing. In some countries it's coming down and then peaking. In other countries it is still peaking. And so therefore it's very important that all of us have some sort of a combined strategy to deal with with this vulnerable section of a society, labor. I will just give you an idea of what we went through, what Pakistan went through when we imposed the lockdown to stop the spread of the virus. We were faced with this twin challenge. On the one hand, we had to deal with a spreading disease which we knew would overwhelm our hospitals. Our healthcare we knew could not cope if suddenly this virus peaked. So on one hand, we had to slow the spread of the virus. But then we had this other problem. What do we do with this informal part of our economy where most of people were self-employed, where the labor force was not registered, so we had no record of our labor force. So when the moment we imposed the lockdown, suddenly all these people became unemployed. And not just unemployed, the self-employed people or the people who were not registered, and that's the majority of the labor in our country, in the informal sector. Now the problem we faced was that this labor, their families depended upon the incomes, the daily incomes or the weekly incomes of this labor. And if they could not earn, their families could not eat. So in the beginning, we had the situation in the first 2-3 weeks where cars going into poor areas of our society were actually attacked by people who were hungry. So therefore, we came up with this idea of a smart lockdown. We decided that we would, on the one hand, stop all places where there were public gatherings. So schools, colleges, marriages, anywhere, sports activities, everything we stopped. But on the other hand, we allowed other activities like construction and agriculture. We did not stop any workers in the agricultural area because, of course, then we would have had a huge food crisis. But construction activity, which employs most amount of workers in our cities, we open it up fairly quickly. On top of it, we decided that we needed to transfer cash to this informal part of our labor, which there was no registration. Those who were registered, we asked the employers to keep them employed, and we compensated for them. But the ones who weren't registered, we set up the system of people registering with our SARS program, which was this program through which we distributed money. We had desks everywhere where people were registering there. We had them checked. And then in Pakistan's history, never was so much money transferred to so many people in such a short space of time. So that's saved us from some of the worst aspects of the lockdown. For instance, we saw what was happening in India. India did the opposite. They went for a curfew almost. And they had the huge problem of millions of migrant workers who were just left stranded. And on top of it, their poverty, because of this very strict lockdown, their poverty rates have gone up. But having said this, the future is very uncertain. We don't know how long the economy will take to recover from the impact of this lockdown. So no one is sure right now where we are headed. And we are all praying that some vaccine comes out as a cure to this virus. But in the meantime, this uncertainty prevails. And what we all know, the most vulnerable section of our society remains our labor. And that's why this summit is extremely important. We need to share ideas. We need to have some sort of a joint strategy on protecting our labor class, our laborers who are at the moment, businesses are going bankrupt. The small and medium industry, which employs the highest number of people, is the most vulnerable. In fact, the most bankruptcies are in the small and medium industry. And that's why we need some sort of a strategy. Our second problem is, of course, our workers who are working abroad. This country depends upon their remittances, and not just Pakistan. I know a lot of other countries depend upon the remittances of their labor working abroad. Mr. Guy Ryder, we need some strategy of how we can convince these countries to be a bit more sympathetic, even though we know all countries are facing huge problems right now. But we need them to be sympathetic to these laborers, who are working in countries which we know are facing problems. Secondly, we need some joint strategy, how we can soften the impact on laborers all over the world. So I thank you again for holding this very important conference at a very critical juncture in history as far as labor is concerned. And we would love to share ideas with other people. We would like to know what other countries are planning to do, what their experiences are. We will of course keep people other countries updated with what we are facing and what we feel the way forward is. But this conference is a beginning, I feel. After that, this constant exchange of ideas I'm sure will help all of us to help our labor. Thank you.
I want to thank the Prime Minister for his contribution, and then we will move on to hear the message of Her Excellency Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, State Councillor of the Republic of the Union of Myanmar.
Chairman, Excellencies, let me begin by expressing our thanks to the ILO for convening this global summit at this most challenging time for workers all over the world. Last year, we all rejoiced in the celebration of the 100th anniversary of the ILO and the successful adoption of the Centenary Declaration for the Future of Work. Unfortunately, now, barely 9 months after the adoption of the declaration, the world is facing the unexpected outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. This new virus attacks everyone indiscriminately, whether rich or poor, but its impact falls harder on the poor and vulnerable. Workers, in particular women, are affected most severely. Its impact on the economy, labor market, and livelihoods will be more prolonged and hard-hitting than initially expected, as our pandemic is showing no signs of abating. We must therefore strike a balance between our twin objectives, protecting the health of workers and taking measures to ensure that their businesses can keep running. Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, for Myanmar, our people are the main source of our strength. To overcome a resource constraint, we have taken a whole-of-nation approach, mobilizing our people. The unique character that has emerged clearly from our pandemic response is strong voluntarism, charity, and a sharing spirit. To ensure that no one is left behind, our response covers all vulnerable segments, including IDPs and affected workers. As a result, we have to date managed to keep the virus under control. As of today, we have only about 300 infected cases and 6 cases of death, and recovery has also been good. We are treading the middle path between our parallel efforts to protect public health while mitigating economic impacts. At this time of crisis, migrant workers are faced with difficulties in foreign lands where there is no access to social protection. They are looking to their motherland for aid. Myanmar has made every effort to bring back all its citizens and to provide food and assistance to all returnees at quarantine centers until they can go back to their homes in safety. The government is keeping a record of the skills of the returnees and creating job opportunities for them by initiating labor-intensive projects in the construction and agriculture sectors, as well as cash for work schemes linked to rural development. I believe that the issues of the migrant workers is one that deserves ILO's greater attention. Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, Myanmar is working together with ILO to promote labor standards, and we are determined to follow up the recommendations of the ILO Centenary Declaration, in particular, protection of labor rights. Recently, we enacted a new child law in line with the Convention of the Rights of the Child and ratified the ILO Minimum Age Convention number 138 to address the issue of child labor. In addressing the challenge of the pandemic, we are following the policy response based on the 4 key pillars suggested by the ILO. First, to stimulate the economy and employment, Myanmar has developed its COVID-19 Economic Relief Plan, CERP, which comprises a series of actions designed to cushion the financial, social, and economic impacts of the pandemic and provide loans to vulnerable sectors and small and medium-sized businesses. To realize the second pillar of supporting enterprises, we established a committee to remedy the economic impact of COVID-19, along with the COVID-19 fund to support the 3 most affected enterprises, namely garment industries, hotels and tourism, and MSMEs. The government also provided social security benefits for insured workers who have lost jobs. Essential food items and cash transfers are also provided to families without regular income. Given the serious impact on vulnerable groups, we have to avoid any step that could disrupt supply chains and exports in this most affected sector of garment industry. Under the third pillar of protecting workers in the workplace, the government has issued instructions on new working arrangements at workplaces.
Only those factories that have COVID-19 preventive measures in place are allowed to resume operations. Myanmar encourages effective tripartite social dialogue for solutions as outlined by the fourth pillar. The tripartite representatives conducted education programs on COVID-19 in all industrial zones. I have myself taken part in a series of video conferences with people involved in combating the pandemic, and these have included representatives of workers and employers. Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, Myanmar has been working in partnership with the ILO to conduct research on the pandemic's impact on our labor market and to organize training for our workers. I would like to take the opportunity to thank the ILO for supporting our COVID-19 response. The global pandemic has already taken toll of 500,000 lives, disrupted livelihoods, and devastated the world of work. This is a time for maximum cooperation. This unprecedented global challenge requires global cooperation that delivers concrete actions in response to the common challenges we face on the future of work. Thank you.
We are grateful to the State Councillor for her intervention. Now let's turn back to the social partners with a statement from a worker representative at this moment, and that is from Ms. Rima Nanavati, leader of the Self-Employed Women's Association of India.
Namaste, and a very good day to all of you. We all have been living in very unusual times. The world has become turbulent. The COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting lockdown has been very destructive for the informal sector workers' work and income. A study conducted by SEWA, the Self-Employed Women's Association, very clearly showed that 71% of the informal sector workers had lost their livelihoods completely. Some 63% survived only on one meal a day, and 73% would starve if the situation continues in a similar way longer. Almost 43% of the children of these informal sector workers who had just started going to school will have to be dropped out of schools, and the worst affected amongst them would be the girls. This has been the reality of the informal sector workers because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the related lockdowns. For the urban informal sector workers, social distancing, quarantine has been very difficult. Maintaining hygiene, sanitation is even more difficult for the urban informal sector workers. In spite of all this, I'm very happy to share that the informal sector workers and their union have quickly adapted to digital organizing, using digital modes, digital technologies and applications for organizing, membership renewal, for education and awareness related to COVID-19, but also to e-trainings and virtual modes of learning and education. We also have the opportunities of initiating new enterprises of the informal sector workers. The vegetable vendors and the vegetable growers, the members in the rural areas, were linked together and they have now an enterprise where the vegetable vendors no longer have to sell sitting on the streets, but they ride electric rickshaws and do home deliveries of vegetables and fruits. Likewise, the agribusiness initiative also was in big demand. I would like to emphasize here that informal sector workers, therefore, are not a liability, but they help in building a nation's economy. They are human capital, which needs to be shared and enabled to build their capacity. Therefore, I would strongly like to emphasize here that in spite of relief for the informal sector workers, what is needed is a universal social protection. there is a need for a minimum basic income of up to rupees 15,000 per month for the informal sector workers. There is also a need to build resilience of these informal sector workers' livelihoods and their very tiny enterprises, and therefore a need to set up a livelihood recovery fund so that the flow of capital also follows labor standards. It helps in building the resilience of the informal sector workers. I would also like to mention that there is a need to guarantee employment of a minimum number of 200 days for the informal sector workers, and the governments need to have policies that ensure this. I hope that ITUC, the Global Commission on Future of Work, and ILO together will look at these needs that have emerged and have been thrown out because of the pandemic of COVID-19. The future of work no longer is for the future, but has now become reality. We need to fast track. Thank you.
We thank Ms. Nanavati for that contribution. Now, an important part of the ILO's own contribution to the response to the COVID-19 crisis lies in our partnership with other international organizations. And so it's a particular pleasure now to introduce two of the leaders of those organizations. The first, from whom we will hear now, is the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, Ms. Kristalina Georgieva.
Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Director General Guy Ryder, Excellencies, representatives of the multilateral system, tripartite constituents of the ILO, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me to contribute to your discussions today. I have been saying this is a crisis like no other. No country has been spared from the health, economic, and social impacts of the pandemic. But above all, we have to recognize that this is a human crisis. It is people who are losing their lives and their loved ones, and it is people who are suffering from the economic devastation as businesses close and workers lose their jobs. I have seen the latest ILO figures that show a 14% drop in global working hours during the second quarter of 2020, an equivalent to the loss of 400 million full-time jobs. At the IMF, we have just published our latest economic forecast, and we are predicting that the world economy will contract by about 5% this year. Nearly 95% of countries will likely be worse off in 2020 with lower per capita income than last year. The IMF is responding to the coronavirus crisis in an unprecedented speed and scale to help countries and protect people, especially the most vulnerable. We have already disbursed emergency financing, lifelines to 72 countries. We are especially concerned that the crisis will jeopardize the important development gains of the last years. We know that major epidemics often exacerbate inequality, and this crisis will likely have a disproportionate impact on women and young people, as well as workers in low-skilled jobs and those in the informal sector. Unless we act to protect workers and wages, policies should support workers' employment through measures like short-term work subsidies, providing paid family and sick leave, and support workers' income through expanded social safety nets with broader eligibility criteria. To create jobs as the recovery takes root experience shows that wage and hiring subsidies could reignite the labor market, especially when complemented by policies like training programs and job search support. Here, it will be critical to invest in digital skills and infrastructure. And we must think hard about ways we can make sure that rapid growth in the digital sector leads to benefits that are shared widely across our societies. And looking ahead, policy should lay the foundation for a low-carbon, resilient recovery that would create the millions of jobs while help address the climate crisis. As reopening begins, we must choose what kind of recovery we want. I believe we should think about building a recovery where all can benefit from the transformation. For hundreds of millions of people, this would mean good jobs with a fair wage. Building a bridge to recovery will require global social and environmental solidarity. We can only succeed if we work together. Strong partnerships between government, international institutions, employers, and unions will be critical. And this is where you all come in. I wish you a very fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Yes, I want to thank the Managing Director for that important intervention and that closing invitation to further partnership, which I certainly reciprocate. The second of the international organisations from whom we will now hear is the World Trade Organization, and we will listen now to the message of its Director General, Mr. Roberto Azevedo.
Director General Ryder, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, greetings from the WTO. In this time of tremendous social and economic upheaval, a dialogue like this is more important than ever. COVID-19 has already claimed the lives of 500,000 people. At risk are the lives and the livelihoods of millions more. The outbreak has provoked the worst economic crisis of our lifetimes. The pandemic is transforming the world of work, and ILO figures demonstrate how we have seen job and income losses of a magnitude unimaginable just 6 months ago. Trade has been, of course, severely hit by shocks to supply and demand, affecting jobs, supply relationships, and export earnings. Cross-border value chains have been disrupted. Services like travel and tourism, they have withered. Air freight capacity plummeted. Road and marine transport have done somewhat better, but with the current travel restrictions, tens of thousands of seafarers are stranded on their ships. Commodity prices have fallen, and remittances from overseas workers, which is a key source of foreign exchange for many countries, they're all plunging. Trade in the first half of 2020 registered its sharpest fall on record, but these numbers actually contain a silver lining. The decline could have been much worse. We're actually today in the realm of the optimistic scenario of our early estimates. The pessimistic scenario would see trade contracting twice as much as it has so far. Though this is not a case for complacency, however, but for action. The economic policy choices governments make at home and in coordination with each other will help shape the long-term trajectory of our recovery. We can choose to build back economies that are more resilient, more inclusive, and more sustainable, or we can risk long years of stagnation and anger. To lay the foundation for a strong recovery, countries' monetary, fiscal, and trade policies must pull hard and pull in the same direction. And these must be accompanied by labor policies and social investments to ensure that no one is left behind by economic change. The ILO's Centenary Declaration for the Future of Work recognizes the massive shifts underway in the world of work. Many of these shifts have been accelerated by the pandemic. For example, we have in the space of months moved ahead with teleworking and online shopping on scales that would normally have taken years. Equipping workers to adapt to these shifts is critically important, both as we respond to COVID-19 and in the longer term. While this includes better education and more active labor market policies, it must also involve a wider rethink about improving working conditions in basic services as well as in manufacturing and agriculture. As each of us could see during the lockdowns, some of the most essential jobs in society are among the most undervalued. Keeping markets open to trade will play an important role in fostering our recovery. In the short run, raising trade barriers would threaten access to food and medical supplies. As the health crisis recedes, open markets will offer the predictability and efficiency needed to encourage investments and increase purchasing power. Organizations like the WTO have a vital role in enabling the effective international collaboration we need so much. These collaborative efforts will be essential to build the inclusive and sustainable economies we all want. Since this is likely the last time I address you as WTO Director General, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for your support over the past 7 years. I would also like to thank Guy for his friendship and for the good working partnership that we have built between our two organizations. Thank you all.
But I want to thank Director General Azevedo for his message today, and also for the friendship and cooperation that he has extended to the ILO over his period of mandate at the head of the World Trade Organization. Well, this brings us to the last contribution of this segment of today's proceedings, and it comes from His Excellency Mr. Mohammed Ibrahim Shataye, the Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority, and we will hear from him now.
السيدات والسادة السيد المدير العام لمنظمة
Ladies and gentlemen, Director General of the International Labour Organization, I greet you all, and I'm pleased to speak on behalf of Palestine at this virtual summit of the ILO on COVID-19 and the world of work. Workers and work have been amongst the principal victims of COVID-19 and throughout the world, and in Palestine, the issues linked to workers are affected by the pandemic and the occupation, and this has led to a very serious crisis which affects workers and the people of Palestine in general. We started with a strategy of focusing on prevention, and we were able to be very efficient, and as a result we were one of the countries that was least affected by the pandemic and one of the fastest in containing the situation, which allowed us to return to normality very rapidly and reduce the impact on the labor market and workers. The government of Palestine, in cooperation with civil society and those in the constituents in society, were able to put into place aid for millions of vulnerable families and to provide allowances for workers who had lost their work by providing financial loans to allow activity and building work to continue. We also looked at achieving a balance between protecting human beings and allowing them to continue to earn a living. This is in an economic crisis which is governed by the colonization by the Israeli people, and this is also accompanied by a financial embargo imposed by the United States and UNRWA in terms of the Palestinian authorities. And this is all linked to the withdrawal of funds from funders. And we work in the Israeli labor market and the illegal settlements established on our territory. And so tens of thousands work without official work certificates and cross border controls and control posts daily. So this means that it's difficult to organize their entry and exit by the measures imposed by the Israeli controls. We have requested that they could continue working in Israel for humanitarian reasons. First of all, they said, they allowed that, and then unfortunately they've gone back on the agreement because of the political situation, which brought us into this situation of annexation, which is a serious violation of international rules. Ladies and gentlemen, Palestine and the people of Palestine are looking for peace and development so that we can work to this. We want to go for peace and freedom, social justice, and we want to promote the service of human beings within the framework of human dignity and values. We have confirmed that it's necessary to establish an early alert system for global crises under the United Nations so that we cannot see similar disasters happening again in the future. It is also necessary to say that social dialogue and real partnership are the best tools to face crises and challenges. And it's also important to develop global social protection systems, at the heart of which we have a program for social security, which we will be continuing within Palestine. The future of work is changing rapidly, and this requires more agreements and systems which allow for flexible work and working at a distance, remote working. And it's necessary to work with decent work programs to ensure that safety at work is a priority area. Social justice and human dignity, as well as freedom of human beings, is our ultimate goal, not only in Palestine, but throughout the world. So we don't live just from bread alone, but it is essential for all of us, including workers. So I'd like to thank you, Director General Guy Ryder, for having invited us to participate in this virtual summit, which is extremely important, so that the free world can work with us to protect those who are oppressed and vulnerable, and to end all forms of racial discrimination wherever it takes place. And Abu Mazem, in his letter to the Secretary General of the United Nations, said that it's necessary to deploy efforts on an international level and an institutional level to share the burden between our states and our societies, and to be on the alert in the future. In Palestine, we want to play our role in facing up to this major challenge, and we hope that the world will play its role alongside us in the fight against the occupation and the pandemic. And I would also like to express my sincere condolences to all the families of those who have lost loved ones. Thank you.
The Prime Minister for his intervention, which is the last in this first segment of our Global Leaders Day. Now, we'll be taking a short break of some 10 minutes, but during that break, we will be inviting you to view a series of short videos which introduce some of the issues that the ILO has been working on as part of our response to the COVID-19 crisis. So please don't go away. In a little more than 10 minutes, we'll be back and we will continue with the messages from the global leaders. I'll see you very shortly.
COVID-19 has brought the world of work to its knees. The ILO has been a major player in the international response, measuring and addressing the impact on workers and enterprises, on women, migrant workers and other vulnerable groups, promoting stronger safety and health in the workplace, helping employers with business continuity plans and a safe return to work. And workers have a say in how to stay safe in the workplace, providing the latest policy advice to governments, supporting the UN in coordinating a multilateral response, and working for a better normal.
The cooperatives and other institutions are affected by COVID-19 when they're facing it. They've adopted various initiatives on a financial level to support small and micro enterprises and local companies. Many have transformed their products and services to satisfy local needs, which are essential and in demand of PPE and social assistance. Cooperatives